Guys, I want to talk to you today about a deer I hunted last year. I called him Mr. Mass. I don't typically name any of my deer, but this deer was definitely a deer that I felt worthy of a name. We had hunted him the previous year, had some opportunity. A friend of mine was in a tree stand. He came by him while he was eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich one time. A couple days later, he came by him again while he was chasing the doe and just never even checked up, just kept chasing after her, and he never got a shot. So took he later on in the season during rifle season, my dad and I went out there and had kind of worked out perfect. Deer came out. Most of the deer were about 200 yards. Thought I was going to set up perfect. Deer comes out. Mr. Mass comes out. He's about 275, 300. Just never really got any closer than that, and just stayed behind the rest of the deer pretty much the whole time, and it just made it too hard to really get a shot. Not a shot that my dad felt comfortable with. So we he made it through season, and the neighbors shot him. I got some great hunters that leave some ground around us, and they can be a little hard on them. So nothing wrong with that. But so this deer makes it through season. Alden and I went out, I don't know how many hours trying to find his deer sheds. I know we went 3 days pretty hard trying to find him. And the fourth day, literally driving in on the Ranger and about run him over. Both of them not 10 feet apart, right along the road. So that was a great find. And I thought he had dropped him earlier, and I honestly wouldn't have went after him had I known he hadn't dropped yet. But according to my phone, or not my phone, my cell cams, I thought he had dropped. It must have been I saw just a different deer. But we so we know he's alive. Spring, the following spring is just, I mean, we have torrential downpours just nonstop. And in May, we flooded. This river bottom was probably anywhere from 10 to 15 feet of water for 2 weeks. So this had happened back in '06, '07, in that time frame, and that felt like it took about 3 years to really get our deer back down in this river bottom. And oh no, like, I know Mr. Mass is going to be a giant this year, and this flood is just not going to do us any favors. Probably, I don't even expect to see him, but still going to try and locate him. I put out a couple salt licks. You can see on here. I probably should have put a few more out. I didn't. I put one on here on the west side of the farm and on the east side of this farm. And believe it or not, literally the first deer on the west side of the farm, I get a picture of Mr. Mass. That would also be the only pictures I had of him over a salt lick the rest of the summer. So we go through the summer. I know he's alive because I have pictures of him from early in July. I'm super excited. I know that I really think he's going to push 200, and I don't see him. Don't see him anymore at all. You're going to see some more pin drops here that I call them summer corn, and it's a scouting technique that I've done and had great success with. I will literally take 100 pounds corn and put it in a pile, put a feeder or a camera over it, and let it sit for 10 to 12 days, pull my cameras and check them. Depending on what's on there, I may keep a pile active. If not, I move on to the next spot. That has been extremely effective for me, especially hunting new farms, not so much hunting established farms, but hunting new farms. I felt like this tactic may work here. Since we did have the flood, a lot of the deer were pushed out and they were coming back. So things weren't exactly the same as they had been the previous few years. So I put out summer corn. You can see on the far north end of our river bottom, and I'll put this corn out a couple hundred yards from one another. So, and you'll be absolutely amazed where some bucks or just deer in general will hit one corn pile. They may skip a couple corn piles and hit another one. And I run all these corn piles once, nothing. Never saw him. I thought, man, there's just no way this deer could show up on the farm in July. Everything is here that he needs. We have soybeans out there. We have water. We have cover. Like, he wintered here we know he wintered on our farm last year, and actually the several previous years prior to that. He was here in the summer. stayed in all during the rut, stayed all winter. Like there's just, I can't believe this deer has left. So I'm going to give my summer corn piles one more run. And sure enough, he shows up on one of them. And so I kept that one pretty active through September. I went to Alaska for a couple weeks on a moose hunt. I wasn't able to hunt opening day. And had I been able to hunt opening day, I think I could have killed him. And I get back, he's gone, nothing. And so come to find out, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, there's a pin drop. It's the neighbor's feeder. They're running a redneck feeder down there. Had him consistently on that feeder. They were running cell cams, knew he was in there, pretty much knew that he wasn't on our property hardly ever. And he was just staying on theirs. They're from quite a ways away. They're not able to hunt much. And I had no idea that that's all the closer he was. I really thought he had moved completely different areas. But finally, about the 1st of October, he made a mistake, came onto the property for about 3 days, hung around, and left again. And I thought, that's interesting. You know, he stayed for about 3 days, pretty nocturnal. And there in the middle of October, we had a red moon and a cold front all hit at once. And I thought, man, I bet he comes back onto the property again. And sure enough, he shows up at night. Definitely is dark. On day 1, day 2, he's back at the corn pile again, but it's at night. And I thought, cold front comes in, red moon, perfect setup for a morning hunt. And I just thought, you know, if I get up and he's at the corn pile that night, I'm going to hunt him. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, has not been at the corn pile. And I thought, okay, I'm betting he's moved on at this point. Go to work, and I'm sitting in my office. It's not quite 8 o'clock yet, and cell phone pings, and there he is, right on the trail. And I thought, oh my, like I knew better. I knew I should have hunted that morning. I knew everything lined up to be perfect. I did not hunt. The good news was he was headed east. So the further he headed east, the more he was on our property, and the river was way too high for a deer to be swimming at that time. So at this point, you'll see on the bottom left-hand corner of this picture, there's a stand right along the river, and that's where I had a cell cam right there. And so I knew he was headed east from there, going onto our property. And I suspected he would be leaving our property sooner than later. So it surprised me a little bit that he was headed east. But I thought, man, this is what a perfect opportunity. So that evening, I got in the boat. I hunt this primarily. Every tree stand but one is accessible by a boat. I think that is a key thing for me when hunting this property, and that is what has contributed to the success of being able to kill our target bucks here. So I get in the boat and I go, and right in the middle of the photo, there's a stand right along the river edge, and I thought, man, this is gonna be the spot. And I got there and I thought, no, I feel like I don't know how far he went to the east when he bedded, so I motored on down the river, got to the stand in the bottom left-hand corner of the picture, and got in there, got set up. Everything was kind of perfect, and I actually knew. My cell phone cam goes off. I look at my phone and saw a couple pictures of a smaller buck, and pings again. It was Mr. Mass. I didn't even have to download a high definition version, and this is early in the evening. We have hours of daylight left still, and he comes. The little buck comes cruising right down along the river's edge, hits my little hinge cut, and I made this hinge cut around my tree stand so thick it was hard for me to get in the back side of it, let alone a deer trying to get through it. And this little buck, I wish I could have videoed it. He was almost on his knees crawling through this thing just to, I don't know if his intention was to try and ruin my hunt or what, but he gave it a solid effort. So he comes through, gets in the middle of my hinge cut. It's kind of a V around my tree stand. So when you're hunting along the river here, they don't really have that well of a defined trail. So I always put my tree stand as close to the river's edge as I can. So when I get out of the boat, I don't have to walk far. I don't have to spread any scent, and I can just get right up in the tree. So this tree was probably 15 feet off the river's bank edge. So I took some trees, hinge cut them down, and basically created a barrier around my tree stand so that all the deer would have to walk out in front of me. This deer, like I said, he just bullies his way through there, gets in the middle of it. And I thought, he's going to ruin it. I know Mr. Masters is coming down the trail at this point, but I just don't know how far exactly behind him this little bucky is. So the little buck, surprisingly, gets through there, gets headed on to the west, and no more than he got out of my little hinge cut, I looked back to the east, and there's Mr. Mast coming down the trail. Thankfully, he used a completely different trail that was not muddy. That was, right along the main river levee itself, and was about a 24, 25-yard shot. He cruised right along there, and it was nice. I was able to see him come from a long way, so I wasn't. I was nervous. Don't get me wrong, but I had plenty of time to kind of get prepared and ready for the shot. I knew exactly how far it was, so comes along the trail, and I was able to shoot him, shot him with a slick trick, and watched him. He spun back around, went to the east, and piled up within 75 yards. I actually watched him go down. One of the very first deer I ever watched go down from a tree stand. Usually it's too thick and you can't see. So that is a little bit of the story of how I tracked him down, how I learned his patterns, used cell phone cameras to my advantage. I primarily, almost exclusively use cell cams on this property. I pulled them from every property that I had and moved them all down here just to try and track this deer. I think that was a huge part of the success because I was not down there checking any cameras with any sort of consistency, or just I wasn't down there every other day, looking, pulling camera cards and checking things. And I was able to come through, put out, whether it was a corn in a pile, fill the redneck feeders, and then leave for an extended period of time, whether that was, up to a couple of weeks. So I'm a huge, huge fan of cell phone cameras. They just give us such an advantage of being able to set everything up and leave the area and not have to go back and check those cards. It's just, you can put them out, leave, and just check your phone, make sure everything is working properly. I run mine all summer, but I run them year round. I think they're the greatest thing ever. But this deer, actually, we scored him the night I shot him, and he scored just right at 194. So extremely tickled pink that my buddy was eating a sandwich the year before, and he was a little too far from my dad. Just things played out. One of the neighbor guys could have, I think they probably could have hunted him early season and got him. I know they had some opportunities at him the year before, but just that buck seemed to get pretty lucky and get around everybody. But this is an aerial photo, show you what I've done to be successful. I hunted this deer a total of 3 times before I was able to get him shot. So I did not hunt a lot. I scouted way more than I hunted. And I do think that is something to really consider when you're chasing big deer, is to really pick your days of when you're going to be in a tree stand and make sure you're going to be effective. When you're sitting in a stand, you need to be 100% confident that you're going to shoot a deer and not just, well, I'm going to sit today just to sit. If that's what you're going to do, go to a different farm that doesn't have that big deer on it that you're probably going to spook, and just every time you sit, your odds decrease of killing that deer. And if you just want to go sit, go to a different farm, or go to a stand far away from where you think you'll eventually kill that big deer. But just don't pressure them too much, because if you do, they will absolutely leave your area, and you'll just never had a shot at them at that point. But we'll hopefully this little how I made it happen with Mr. Mask can help, and you learned a little something from that. I know I've taken a lot of things away from hunting him, just how big bucks interact, and really using the red moon and cold fronts to your advantage. I'm a huge fan of hunting in October for big deer. I don't know that I would go out and just randomly sit in October to kill a big deer, but if you are absolutely targeting one deer and you're pretty well dialed in, as I think this is where he's bedded. Your summer sky, and where he's feeding in the evenings. I absolutely think that October is the time to kill one. If you miss that early season, that first week of muzzleloader season and archery season here in Kansas, I think October is just everybody thinks there's an October lull, but it's proven time and time again for me that it is the time to be in the tree stand to kill a big deer. Um, like I said, but I wouldn't randomly go sit in any stand just to, hope to kill a big deer. But I think if you are targeting a very specific buck and you're on his pattern, cold fronts in October are where it's at. I mean, they can still be very predictable, and you have weather on your side. We typically have some pretty good strong cold fronts that'll get them on their feet, and it's just that October lull to me is a complete myth. Um, if you know where your deer are at, you can absolutely go sit and kill them, and that is, I can't emphasize enough how great I think October can be, because when that rut rolls around, yeah, there's pinch points you can hunt. There's different scenarios and that can play out, but realistically, he's on a hot doe and he's going wherever that doe takes him. In October, they're still on a feeding pattern, and that's when you can take advantage of killing them. Is if you know where they bed, where they feed, get in between. So, well, good luck this fall. If you have any questions, again, hit me up on social media or shoot me a message, and I'm happy to help.